I'm stick going. Good and done. All right, we are live and loud from the Beijing near the cloud, China. No, it is cloudy today. We have smog outside, and it's one of the reasons why I'm doing a broadcast now because typically on Wednesday afternoons at lunchtime, I go for a workout. I go for a run, and then I do my little. I do a 4 mile run, 6.44 kilometers followed by some slam ball work, some high intensity interval training, if you will. However, today we have a smog index of how much is this today? What do you call it? AQI Beijing. AQI Beijing. AQI today in Beijing is, it says how much? 154. 154. So I will actually share this with you guys. Air pollution. There we go. So this is the current air quality index of Beijing. And that is the reason why I'm not running outside right now. And instead, I'm broadcasting to you guys from this corner of the world. And as you can see, no thank you, bye bye to you. So this is one of the issues of living in Beijing and living overseas, especially, is this sort of situation where they don't really talk about this. They don't like talking about this part of living here, even though, like in the Western media, this was a huge issue for the Olympics that happened here back in 2008, of course, and then of course again 2022 for the Winter Olympics. And you can see, like, look at this. They can sort of tell what the AQI air quality index is going to be like for the next week or so, and I guess they're just sort of tracking the smog patches that float across the country so often, every now and then. The one issue, I guess, like, and these aren't. It's not fake. Like this, these readings, as much as they are, what would you say, sort of. How would you put them? They look scary. They are scary because it's stuff like this that when you start looking at some of the pollute, PM 2.5, so that's coal dust. PM 10, I can't remember what that is. What is PM 10? PM 10 would be PM. What is PM 10 in air? Particulates matter. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so it's PM 2.5 and PM 10 are particulate matter that are 10 microns or less in diameter. So 2.5, typically that's coal dust. PM 10 would be what? So this would be like vehicles, wood burning, wildfires, industry, dust. So it's just a big form of dust. Uh, ozone 3, what is that? Does it say? Right. O3 is ozone 3, I guess it is NO2 nitrogen, SO2 something carbon dioxide. Temperature, up and down, of course, pressure, it's higher pressure as well as humidity. Yeah, it's been humid for the last little while. We did have some rain in the week, wind, it's not very windy, and that's actually one of the bad things about, when you have smog. In Beijing, if there's no wind in the winter, then you get a huge smog going on, but if there is wind in the winter, and there's lots of wind in the winter, then you have very clear skies, like blue skies, beautifully blue skies. It's just that, when it's windy, then you don't wanna go outside. Again, so typically I do run outside, at this time, but, since it is dirty outside, I've run outside in the smog before, and there is sort of a pros and cons. More, and you'd almost wonder if there are more cons than pros for, running outside in this sort of bad air. Number 1, it seems like it's a very bad idea to go run when there's like a think of, like, if you're running United States, all those forest fires that you guys have, imagine running during that, running a marathon or running, you know, going for a jog. A lot of people would say, "Don't do it," and they're probably right. Now, some of the, articles in the Science some of the research that I've seen gone on that have studied the effects of exercise and the effects of smog on the body uh, as the like over time sort of thing. And not only that, as it pertains to age. So as I'm getting older, there are a couple things like the older people would say you're still young, but the younger people say that I'm a bit old. So right in the middle, I guess you could say. And the issue is that as you get older, over your 40s, your 50s, although again, I can't speak for 50s because I'm not there. Um, the issue is that not just your body starts breaking down, but you have to work on your mobility. Your brain matter is also a bit of an issue. And then the other thing is, well, in terms of your physicality, so being able to keep on moving, um, is that better for you, like, to move and take the hit in your lungs, which then affects your blood, which then affects your brain? Or is it better to forego the run, sit down, sedentary lifestyle, save your lungs, save your blood, save your brain? Now, this might seem a little bit odd to be talking on a, language vlog live stream, but it comes down to brain matter, brain density, and a lot of people will say that if you are, like, studying languages is so good for your brain, it helps you put off dementia. Doesn't prevent dementia, it just puts it off. You're still gonna go crazy at some point. It's just a matter of time, when you are actually gonna go crazy, and as a result, so if you work out, that tends to help, your brain, like, your whole body, keeps your brain active and everything as well. But if you don't work out, then you have that sort of degradation. Now, probably a bunch of ways that you can slice and dice that argument and the science behind it. I usually go to PubMed to research some of these, and I don't have any of these articles ready just yet. I have to go. Read them a while ago, but if you looked up PubMed effects of running on brain health, on blood health, and also physicality, body, you'll see some research that shows that people who tend to work out, who tend to go for runs or lift weights, their muscles don't degrade as fast over time, just the natural degradation of the human body. Same with the bone mass. And this can lead into not just more confidence, which helps, or sorry, it not just leads into a better physical well being, but also leads into confidence, which enables you to remain social with people as well, and that seems to have a huge effect on how your longevity is well. Being social, having people around you, connections that you maintain over time. So it's not just the immediate health benefits of working out that contribute to your longevity. It's all these sort of external, tertiary, secondary, tertiary effects of working out that it's hard to qualify, hard to quantify, hard to quantify it, but it's easier to qualify, I guess you could say. So that's one thing to look at. Now, on the flip side of all that, there have been there have been studies shown or done, um, particularly in Beijing, where they study the effect of smog on the body, and apparently, yeah, the smog will degrade your body if infects in affects your lungs, so your lung capacity as well, which then in turn affects your blood. And if your blood is dealing with garbage in it, then that's all getting cycled through your body and things like that. So your body has to work harder to get rid of all the stuff. Again, go to PubMed, look at the effects of uh, working out, physicality, like running on your body, and then look at the effects of smog. And with it, so there's part one, working out, good for body. Part two, smog, the detriment to the body. Part three is learning language. So when you start learning a language, apparently, again, it helps in reduce or stave off when dementia hits. It helps build up your brain matter. So the argument and the sort of fun little thought for today, if you will, working out increases your brain mass, good for your body, more brain matter. Smog, bad for your body, less brain matter. Learning a language, good for your body, good for your brain matter. But then if you do all those, which one sort of has more, which one has more of an effect on your body? I like to oh, and then there's alcohol, bad for your body, bad for your brain matter. So you have 4 components that you're sitting there. So let's see, if I go for a run in the at lunchtime, that's good, but then it's during a smoggy thing, so I learn a language, and that's good for my brain, but then I have a beer. Ah, shoot, I've now neglected it becomes a almost a joke of itself of how much what's the weighting of each? Like, on a scale of 1 to 10, which one has more on your body? Is it working out, learning a language, being in small, conditions, or drinking alcohol? And, of course, like, doing drugs and stuff like that, but, I mean, I don't touch the stuff. Uh, all of that being said is one of the reasons why I'm not outside, and it's at 154 here in Beijing, the AQI, that is one of the reasons I'm not outside running, instead broadcast I'm talking with you guys. I've noticed that if I go running outside at a time like this, my lungs hurt. And I've done it before. Uh, it's not impossible. You won't drop dead right away. I have tried to run with masks as well, and there is an argument. Some people want another tangent, another meandering blabberdas. The argument of wearing a mask of whether or not they're effective, I have noticed, yes, the masks that 2.5 here, well, you probably know the ones. Let's see. Yes. All right. So a mask like this will let's see which one it is the KN95 mask. So those ones, uh, these aren't just good for aren't good for the coronavirus, aren't good to protect you from the coronavirus. Like the surgical masks, people will say, and doctors wear them, and healthcare workers wear them in hospitals. So obviously they have some sort of effect for blocking germs. Good. Reduces your ability to be contaminated by external germs. That's not what these masks are meant for. These masks, these N95 masks, are meant to block out the particulate matter, the PM2.5 and PM10. Some people say it's not going to do anything. I agree, especially if you smoke. If you smoke, then wearing a mask isn't really going to change your life too much here in Beijing. But I've noticed that if I wear those white masks and if I don't wear the white masks, then yeah, there's a huge difference. I actually went ahead and bought some cloth masks because I'm not sure if you can tell, but I have a rather large nose, and as a result, these masks can be very uncomfortable after a while, especially if you wear them for a long time. Now, wearing masks in general for a long time will hurt your face no matter what. But I bought some reusable ones, so cloth masks that have a CO2 or a PM, whatever, a pollution filter that you can slide into it, and then you're supposed to replace the filter every now and then. I don't know what the duration is, but that way you can wash the masks and reuse them. You don't have to worry about getting any more. And I use those for the whole pandemic, or at least most of it. Even though those cloth masks, whenever I went on an airplane or a train, they would come around with a surgical mask and say, "Put this on as well," or instead. I'm like, "But mask, why would I use an inferior mask to protect myself against such an unhealthy pathogen?" And they're like, "Doesn't matter. Put the surgical mask on." All right. I don't want to kicked off this flight again. No, I've never been kicked off a flight. Pay. Anytime soon. So masks, I have worn these. Tried to wear these while I was running outside in this sort of unhealthy AQI. Uh, ended up taking it off. Two minds. One, wearing the mask is good because it prevents smog from the unhealthy pathogens or unhealthy coal dust from getting into your lungs. Bad is that you're recycling your carbon dioxide. So when you exhale, and you do that fast, it's like wearing a paper bag on your face at the same time that, you're basically breathing in air that you've already expelled, and that can lead to issues as well. There was a kid here in China who died, because they were wearing masks during, a gym class, and, body couldn't take it, so he collapsed and passed away. Sad as it is. So there is that argument against wearing masks. Now, there are masks that you can buy that are called oxygen deprivation masks, and these are the ones that would simulate high altitude training. So boxers would use them, Thai fighters, like a lot of high performance sports athletes would be wearing um, these oxygen deprivation masks. I've seen them in Canada too. They look like Bane's mask, Bane from the Dark Knight, The Dark Knight Rises. That one, like they they cover your face, and they're meant to reduce the amount of air that is going through you that you're breathing in through your mouth or through your nose. Now, in to do that seems like a good idea. It's the one of the easiest ways, or the easier way to restrict airflow, which then enables you to work on developing your body or building your body in such a way that it doesn't require as much oxygen to perform at a high level. That's the argument. Anyway, you don't need a oxygen deprivation mask. There's this one triathlete that I knew. He's like, you have to work on your breathing at some point, and it's going to have to be through your nose, not through your mouth. And there's another guy on Instagram. What's his handle? I can't remember. Uh, but one of these guys was like, "Yeah, you nose breathe rather than mouth breathe. Mouth breathing doesn't purify the air as it goes through your system, but nose breathing does." The argument being that when you are working out and you're taking in a lot of oxygen, you can reduce or deprive yourself of of a certain amount of oxygen by breathing in your nose. So it's like restricted breathing, basically. And since it's through your nose and all your little capillaries and nose hairs and stuff in your nasal passages, it cleans the air, and so it helps your lungs a lot more than breathing through your mouth. That's I mean, I know there are people who talk about breathing through your nose rather than breathing through your mouth because it's a way to, I guess, not just uh, mimic high altitude training or oxygen deprivation, but it is a form of oxygen deprivation. It's not just the amount of air either. They also talk about the uh, the the method of breathing. So you have to change the way you breathe as well when you are performing at different levels. I don't know. I mean, I, I changed the way I breathe to live in Beijing. Not sure if that's going to be very helpful. So, like, that's the realities of living Beijing. On a day like today, tend I do have a treadmill indoors that I can use, but I figured what I would do instead is uh, do the live stream. I ate lunch already, have another cup of coffee, and then after this, I would go to the gym that has these air filters and everything. And the gym's also very busy during lunchtime. So after this live stream, I will gym, get my ride on. I will get on the stationary bike, study my Chinese as well. Right on. So I think that works. All right. So who am I? WTF? What do I do? Today, I did want to talk about some of the English teachers here. The Now, my name is Steven. This here is my language vlog channel, and the channel is meant as a sort of, what would you call it, a way to keep me honest in my own language studies, and something that I started to. Uh, I have various language checks that I do. So I'm currently I live in Beijing, China. I study Mandarin Chinese and Russian at the moment. Now, Russian, some people were being like, "Why would you study Russian? It seems like a difficult language to study Mandarin Chinese, in addition to Mandarin Chinese." And you're right. There very much is. But this website, this YouTube channel, is supplemented and supported by a couple of other projects that I have, or just a couple other subsidiaries. Number one is my language vlog newsletter, which you can go on over to. It is on sendfox.com, where I'll put this in the chat so you guys can take a look and sign up there. It's I try to produce it once a week, and it sort of gives a little roundabout, a little wrap up of the things that we talk about, not just the videos, but some ideas. So if you've noticed on my YouTube channel, I have a lot of YouTube shorts as well. In the newsletter, I'll discuss those topics a little bit more. And not only that, in addition to the newsletter, I have a podcast. And the podcast is currently hosted on Libsyn. So you can head on over to Stephen's Lot Language Blog Podcast.libsyn.com. And if you don't want to figure out how to use the RSS thing to subscribe, then you can head on over to Spotify as well. And Spotify now hosts my. Sorry, it doesn't host it. Uh, it hosts my podcast, even though the see if it's gonna work. I think it should. There you go. There's the podcast, and those are sort of the three major subsidiaries of this YouTube channel. And of course, where's the other one? Um, well, then there is the YouTube channel itself, which is where you're watching at the moment right now. But the podcast, the newsletter, these live streams and everything, they're all sort of meant. I'm supposed to be a little bit more disciplined in my studies as a result. Sometimes I'm good with it, sometimes I'm bad with it. So here's my language channel as it is. That this is the one that see we're currently broadcasting. I have a few different components to the language log. These long form videos. So I do actually employ a video editor to help me cut down some of the footage to edit some of the videos. And she helped me with this one, looking at aging drain holes, which has become a very popular video, where I literally just go outside and I look at the covers of these manhole covers and translate them in 8 minutes. It's actually kind of a funny video. Uh, this one I did is China Safe, which this video, a little bit perturbed by this one now because I shot that about a month, 2 months ago already. And since then, there have been a few stabbings in China. So I talk about how in that video, I talk about how China is safe and it's not like people are going to walk around and stab you. My neighborhood is a little bit different than some outskirts, and there are rough patches, notably Daxing, which is the southern portion of Beijing. I've heard from some people that it's not always the friendliest of places that people go to, especially if they are foreigners, if they're not from China. So it's that video talks about China being safe in general. But I think the reality is that you still have to be a little bit aware of your surroundings and not take for granted your safety. You do have to be aware with your environment for sure. But that video, I'm going to have to make another video about why I stay in China. A lot of people have asked me. So one of the questions is like, is China safe? A lot of people ask, are you safe in China? Are you not concerned about all the video cameras and stuff like that? I go, well, yeah, I guess there is that component, but then I now work from home, so I don't really go out very much. Again, as I was talking about getting older before, I generally don't go out and get into as many situations as I used to as a younger man. Nowadays, as an older man, I very much stay at home and work and do live streams for language learning. The other question I get is, why did you go to China? And I meant to shoot this video yesterday, actually over the weekend, over the last week, because we had a national. And I was thinking, like, how do I talk about this? Well, it's not so much. why I came to China, it's why have I stayed in China for so long? And I can't help but think that a lot of the reasons why I stayed in China are not what you would hear anywhere else. Because literally, I don't the food, the culture, the language, all I can tell you, I didn't come here for that. I came here for work, I came here for a job, I came here to make money, and that's it, and that hasn't changed. So the even though I've changed jobs, I don't really feel like I don't want to be changing jobs because if I did change jobs, then it would require, like, visa changes and getting used to new colleagues and new work style, even though, like, if I stayed in the ESL industry, I wouldn't require too much retraining in that regard, but what would happen is that I don't wanna move. I wanna pack up my apartment. I think that is the sad reality of what had not just the pandemic, but the pandemic made that a little bit more clear and made it a little bit more difficult to leave, like, why I haven't left China, why I haven't left Beijing, why I haven't changed jobs is because I just don't place up, man. I find a new place to dwell, and I'm okay here in, Hotel Beijing for the time being. So I will, make a video about, why did I come to China? Title? What's the clickbait title? White guy goes to China first time. Why? Should that be it? Or what else would it be? Uh, why would you ever go to China? Something like that. The other one, why did I why I came to China? Rather, why I have not left China. Why I can't leave China? Well, that'd be a good title, wouldn't it? It's like, ooh, Canadian can't leave China. Oh wow! If I said China won't let a Canadian leave, it has a different it's all clickbait. I mean, I know there's other, video artists out there using clickbait titles to get your attention, and, some of them I agree with. Actually, a lot of them I don't agree with, to tell you the truth, they're gonna do. So, these videos, I do have quite a few videos here, making a study hour spreadsheet. I thought that was a good video, good educational video, and you can see it all got 74 views. People don't care. Spreadsheet to study a language. They want to see the truth about China. The truth is that I sit at home and do my job. Mostly, I did my job already. And I've moved on since then. YouTube Shorts. These are a lot of these are either snippets of life in China. I was out weeks ago there. Played Black Myth Wukong, that famous video game. Went to the cafe show. I do some translation work as well from uh, placards. You would say that Guangpan Xingdong. This is one of these public service announcements that you would see hung up on construction sites around the country. And of course, there's other language learning aspects to these YouTube shorts, which is how they started out was observations on my own learning to travel or to class. Should you read every letter in a page? On dinosaurs, aliens, and language. I thought that was a funny one. Um, also, about my own practicing Chinese characters and things like that. So, weather update from Beijing. Hot. It just gets hot in Beijing. It's hot and humid. And when you work at your apartment, it's like you sweat all the time in your apartment, and you love it because you don't have to go outside and change clothes. Live streams, these are I typically do 3 live streams per week. Today, we're gonna talk a little bit about, teaching English. I see that Danny B is asking, "What makes a good English teacher?" How about that question? Sure, I can talk about that in a short minute or so. So I do 3 live streams per week, typically, talking about working overseas or teaching English overseas. I talk about learning Chinese. Typically, I think this is kind of funny, that I can just it's not so much funny as it's very practical and relevant to my own life, so and I think people will value this because on Mondays, typically, usually, I study Chinese characters, and if you ever watch one of these live streams, what happens is that I go through the components of the character. I basically have to, as I'm reviewing these flashcards, it's interesting, it's easy Knowing the Chinese characters requires not just memorizing the sound, but then you have to remember what it means as well. And in order to do that, you can suss out the meaning of the character by looking at the different components. So that's what I do on Mondays, quite a bit with my Let's Learn Chinese live stream. I just talk about well, I just study flashcards, or I'll talk a little bit about the language itself. We have a sometimes I do reading. I'll read from Do Chinese on the website as well. We are working on a Halloween special for this month. Hopefully, hopefully we get it done in time. It's no one else's fault but my own because I'm live streaming and yet I should be scripting at the same time, which it's the issue about scripting Chinese videos is that I have to know what I'm scripting so I can come up with an idea like, "Hey, let's write about Chinese horror stories." The problem with learning about Chinese horror stories is that if it's not available in English, I have to read it in Chinese, and I have to find a Chinese source, and then it's like, well, is my Chinese good enough to read these stories naturally, or do how much translation work do I have to do? So it adds a little bit of the complication. The third live stream that I do is learning Russian. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm studying Russian as well because I find it easier language than Chinese because it's alphabet based. I grew up with Ukrainian, and Russian borrows a lot from European languages, which makes it far easier to figure out what a word means. My biggest challenge with Russian are the conjugations and the declensions. So that's something to work on and over time. So that's the major sort of get go, my major spiel of this site. So YouTube channel is the main focus typically. Then I have a newsletter that you can check out over there as well. Podcast on Libsyn or on Spotify, and it should be on Apple, but Apple requires me to submit the RSS feed, and I haven't done it just yet. So it will be on Apple very soon. Danny B, what makes a good English teacher? Oh, well, I hate to say it. Some people have said that I am not a good English teacher. And there are a few. What have I noticed to be a good English teacher? Usually they're female. I can just tell you that right off the bat. Typically they're female. The other thing, typically they would have um, a lot of education in regards to learner methods. They don't have to necessarily be university taught, like what is pedagogy and stuff like that, but anything along the lines of, well, yeah, I guess university educated would help if they've taken like the CELTA or ESL certificate or other training, especially training with the young learners. I have noticed that teachers who have training specifically for young learners, we're talking like kids under 18, under 16, that's like high school, middle school. People who have that sort of training tend to be a little bit more gentler and patient in their work and their approach to teaching English. That's just what I've seen, and also what I've experienced with my own language teachers. That there are because I study Mandarin Chinese and I also study Ukrainian and Russian online, and I've noticed that the teachers who teach students, like young students, more often than they teach adults, it just seems to be a little bit more like they like pulling you along instead of giving you like a block to jump over, if that makes sense. So when you teach an adult, you don't have to explain every little thing because adult learners, working professionals, they have life experience and they can pick up on the nuances of a language a little bit easier than a child can. A child is just putting their faith in you that whatever you're doing, especially given the societal sort of moat around teaching and sort of any authority. Children don't have that sort of viewpoint that someone could have any sort of maliciousness about them. That gets that's when they get a job or bad grade. That's when they start figuring out that external circumstances might not always be what they seem. But not that that has to be let's not dwell on the negative of this. Instead, uh, you teach when you teach an adult a language, English, Russian, Mandarin, Chinese, you can refer to life situations. For example, buying a plane ticket. For example, um, paying an apartment bill, finding an apartment to live in. These, or going out with a boyfriend or girlfriend, going out with friends. More generally, going out with friends. The idea of going out with friends is an abstract concept. But for children, going you wouldn't be going out with friends, you would be playing with friends. Well, what does playing with friends mean? Usually it's like playing with toys, or you could be maybe not so much playing video games, but, it's going to be like if 1 or 2 kids or a group of kids playing soccer or you're physically doing something, whereas, like, going out with friends as an adult, it's like, well, we got hammered. After class, we went and got blitzed, and we learned a new word called blitzed. It can refer to, having an obscene amount of, beverages in an evening. So that's what I mean by putting a block. What do you do when you go out with friends? Block. Whereas what with a child, especially teachers who have learned it's called more of the communicative method where you ask questions and it's called eliciting. So you elicit the answer from the student or from the learner. You ask questions. Oh, so it's but, for example, if it's on the weekend, when is the weekend? Oh, weekend is Saturday and Sunday. Okay. Do we go to school on the weekend? No, we don't go to school on the weekend. What would we do on the weekend? Play with friends, sleep in, eat dessert, things like that. Do homework. Do homework is a very common response as well. And then by asking questions like that, you start eliciting these different answers, building up the vocabulary that way they can learn to connect weekend, the concept of having no school, no work with these other activities, playing, dessert, video games, etc. Then you go, okay, playing with friends. What do you do when you play with your friends? Oh, we play mahjong. You play mahjong with a young child. Oh, you play. You know, is that one? Would you know? Chess, checkers, play soccer, play video games. Just play with friends. It could be an abstract sort of idea of playing with friends. It doesn't matter. You can be slaying dirt at each other for all they matter, or eating the dirt as you do to build up some immunology, immunity. I don't know. Please, this is not health advice, not at all. So, working on different sports terminology, you can talk like what kind of sports would you play? Soccer, football, tennis, um, rugby, darts. You also play darts. So things like that. Where with a child, I have found that it's much more about asking small questions that lead up to a bigger concept, whereas with an adult, you would put a block down of a concept. Weekend, what do you do on the weekend? And then the students themselves typically have to surmount that block on their own. Now, the other thing with that is that children don't know. Like, it's not like you can a child shows up to your class, you can't expect them to have number of years of language tutelage in their brain already. It's like they're fresh in their minds. Whereas with an adult, especially a working professional, they probably have been studying English or the language on and off for years, and they some of their errors could be what we call fossilized. Fossilized means that it's difficult. They become sort of the routine. It's so automatic that you can't change a fossilized error very easily. An example of fossilization is mispronunciation. So with a child, they don't. It's very difficult to make this argument. I would say with a child, their their mouth muscles are still their mouth muscles and their muscle and brain connection is such that it's still developing. And as a result, you can teach a child to pronounce a word better over time than you can an adult because that connection has sort of been established in a human, like in an adult's brain. And so it's more difficult to break a bad pronunciation habit with an adult compared to a child. Other Fossilized errors would be systemic or systematic? Systemic or systematic? Common errors. Recurring errors in speech, missing articles like the, an, or no article, misconjugating things as well. That like if I was speaking Russian or something like that and not getting the conjugation correct, that could be a fossilized error. Uh, One other common, it might not be a fossilized error, but in Chinese, like if you ever hear a Chinese person speak, it can be both funny and a little bit embarrassing when they talk about different genders in English, and they can confuse he or she. And it's no in English satire and humor, we love to poke fun at this, but for a student who's not used to that, uh, difference between they do have it, but with she and he is such a is one letter difference, but huh, she, huh. It's 2 different phonemes that you have to memorize, very different, even though the spelling is very similar, and so that can be very difficult for a learner, who's not familiar with it to pick up on. Drill that. The the automatic response when you see a female character, whatever it is, and you translate that as she or her, and then a male character as he or him. And of course, the last few years in popular culture has seemed to shift, ignoring that much of the world uses genders to classify many of its elements, nouns, adjectives, etc. Um, Masculine, feminine, neuter. And I guess there's also like neuter singular where like they can be what are you guys up to? But guys like GUYS can refer to anybody, like women. If you went up to a group of guys and said, "Hey, what are you girls up to?" It would have a different connotation to it. Whereas it could use guys with both men and women. So again, going through saying that to a group of kids, "Hey, what are you guys up to?" And saying that to a group of women, old college or working professional women, uh, you might be able to get away with it, but some of them are like, "Why are you saying guys? Like, why don't you say something else, like ladies instead?" So those concepts can sometimes be introduced later on for learners. Wow, adult learners. Boy, speaking too much. 1 second. I'm going to mute. Give me 1 second here. The other thing that I've noticed with good teachers is that a lot of them they're patient, and this again I think goes back to uh, having training with children. Being able to teach children is a lot different than teaching adults. You can expect a certain uh, flow in a language classroom for adult learners compared to a children's class. Uh, Even with my own teachers, again, patience is a virtue, and I think this is where I probably get criticized because I'd like to say that I am the most patient person that I know, but only I'm willing to wait for that answer, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So having patience, being able to ask questions, eliciting, and then also for makes a good English teacher, it would depend mostly on what is the goal of that class. For kids, for younger learners, you aren't so much concerned about accurate reproduction of the language. So it doesn't matter if they get the pronunciation right. It doesn't even matter if they get the vocabulary right. In class, it's just a matter of getting them interested and going home, taking away the concepts that you worked on. So sports, how do you play? What sports do you play with friends? And uh, foods do you eat? What type of foods do you eat? So big general topics. You're not looking at specifics. Whereas for adults, it might be that you are more targeting test preparation. They are looking, especially if it's a working professional, looking at what would you netiquette, like internet etiquette, that sort of idea. Also, workplace etiquette, understanding the idea or the concepts of working in a multicultural or international setting. Children don't have that much of a reference for those styles of classes, whereas an older group would want to know a little bit more about the slang terminology, about nuances to speech, intonation as well. English is terrible for this. You it can be funny sometimes to play around with pronunciation in English because depending on the intonation of a word, it changes the meaning. It can have a different uh, sort of context, a different contextual. What's that word that I'm looking for? Where you have a there's this meaning up here, like the actual meaning. If you wrote it down, it means this, but then there's a different meaning, subtext to it, where that's what English intonation does. Not so much pronunciation, but English intonation really can change the meaning of the sentence. You went where? 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 How you pronounce something can change the idea, like what's that word? Context? The contextualization, the meaning, the overall blah 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 of the language. Blah, blah, blah. Yes, that's a technical English term that we use all the time to define a certain something. Can't quantify. Please don't use that in your classes. So that, like, teaching intonation in, English class, for adults would be probably more appropriate than teaching that at, a younger learner, level as well. What else would make a good English teacher? Well, so you got patience, resourcefulness, being able to out of the bag. I think, again, I have to give credit. Maybe I just have sort of a it's something that I'm not good at doing. Like, if I well, I have to think about this because I haven't been in that situation for a long time, and the situation I'm talking about is that if everything falls apart, how do you resurrect a class? A bunch of children looking at you, eyes wide open, going, "Yes, teacher," you know, waiting for you, contrasted with a group full of working professionals who are sitting there going, sobering up again, are we? You know, they would have less patience for that sort of uh, downtime. If anything. Contrast that with teacher or sorry with children, you would have to have a lot more. I don't want to say flashing lights and everything because that's not entirely appropriate. That's not exactly what I mean. What I mean instead is that you have to have a, uh, a grab bag full of activities that you can draw from given X number of situations. So if it's uh, your computer goes down, your PowerPoint slide won't work, USB doesn't work, like situations like that in an adult class could cripple you in the sense that if you plan to have a presentation class and the projector doesn't work, then you have an issue. What else could you do? So having that flexibility, that resilience of being able to change the specifics of the classroom, what you're going to do. With kids, one of the games that I love playing with the kids is the monster game. And so the monster game is a vocabulary game where you can usually what you'd have is either a dice, or you can make a piece of paper, put a bunch of numbers on it, roll the dice. You get one of the kids to roll a dice, or yeah, you maybe before you roll the dice, you would say, okay, what's what's another body part? What are these? They're hands. Okay, so let's roll the dice. 6. This monster has 6 hands, and so you go draw a character with 6 hands. You could also talk I don't wanna say anatomy, but the body, you could start, well, where should we start with our monster? If we were going to build a creature, a robot or something, it doesn't have to be a monster, it can be a robot. What would we start with? Would we start with the feet? Would we start with the hands? Would we start with heart inside? Something along those lines where You don't have to you could start anywhere, and then you can sort of it's called activating the schemata, and activating the schemata is basically in the mood to learn, putting you in the mood to study that subject. So the monster game or the robot assembly game would be a vocabulary game about the body, and just hands, feet, hands, feet, knees, eyes, nose, head, hair, stuff like that. You take a body part, roll the dice. However many is on the dice, you draw that number of body parts on the creature itself, and that you can get away with that in children's class. You cannot do that in an adult class without some very interesting results, and probably people wondering why they're paying good money to have a teacher roll a dice and talk about, "Oh, no, we can't have 2 or 3 legs would be a little bit, let's not do 3 legs." See myself being in elementary school in China, to 30 kids per classes per day. Danny, you are correct. 30 classes, actually, 30 kids per class, I think it's a small class. You might have to do 40. You might have to have 30 kids. Depends where they are, depends which schools you go to. So, commenting here, Danny was seeing, talking about teaching school in China. The Chinese elementary classes are notoriously, famously large, 40 kids per. They are very well behaved, although, uh, in my experience, English language class with a foreigner has always been seen more as a party than as a serious subject, and that is because, the way that foreign teachers approach and conduct their is a lot different than the usually, much more stricter approach, that Asian teachers would have, Chinese teachers, Koreans, Japanese, and no doubt there's sort of, not just an education element, but cultural element in there as well. There's a bit of a cultural cultural relationship between the older person, the shared knowledge, culture, and community, and the younger person as well. Something that as a foreigner, when you're coming into the community for a first time, you might not always be aware of. But with English classes, as far as I can tell, the most English classes, yeah, they seem to be fun times where like, which is completely different from learning science or math, learning Chinese or learning, like, the local like, learning their own language rather than a foreign language. So that's something to consider as well if you're gonna go teach in an elementary classroom, that you will be considered to be the fun portion of the day, and although you will have smart kids who, love being in your class, understand that when you play games, it's just gonna be pandemonium. They don't get to do that in science class or chemistry or robotics. Those classes very well, very, what would you call it? Um, well behaved. English classes where you can sort of get away with a few things that you can't get away with your homework teacher as well. 30 kids per class. Yeah, I think China, 6 classes per day. I don't know how many classes they teach per day. I've never taught in an elementary school in China. I taught in elementary in South Korea. I don't think I would go back to teaching kids, basically because, again, I have full respect for teachers who go teach kids. They have far more patience than I do. Again, talking about the, resiliency, flexibility of being able to, make up a class like that. The other thing I've noticed about good English teachers, and again, going back to the ones that teach young learners, especially with young learners, but something like the CELTA, this will teach you this methodology of you have to be prepared for class, which seems very silly. Uh, of course, you're going to be prepared, but at a university with an group of kids, older group of learners, I think it would be easier for you to show up and say, okay, today we're going to have a debate. Today we're going to talk about this. Today we're going to talk about that. And you can even hire people, students up a little bit, strong student, weak student, two friends, not friends. You can do that, get away with that in a older group than you compared with a younger group. Younger group, you typically have to have everything sort of blocked out according to time and be prepared with your materials, You don't want to be fudging around with cutting things out unless that's part of the class. Like if you make uh, activities part of the class, like we're going to our first part of the class is to we're going to sharpen our pencils or something like that. Or today we're going to organize our papers in the correct way. But that can also lead into like color, shapes and sizes, numbers as well. How many pieces of paper do you have? What does the paper is it folded? Is it open? Is it flat? Is it standing up? We can talk about things like that as well. But these are things you have to be prepared for that. You can't just make it up as you go along, students. As I've noticed, good teachers, again, I'm talking about you question was about making a good English teacher, preparation, preparation, resilience, flexibility, patience. Those sort of 4 things, I think maybe flexibility and resilience, uh, are almost very similar. Flexibility more about working in the moment, and then resilience is someone's gonna say something to you, and you're like, "All of that effort into that, that's things I get." You're gonna have to deal with that at some point, whether it's administration, a parent, a student, or another teacher who's gonna say something, and you're gonna be like, "Why do you do this?" And that's because why do you do this? I mean, yeah, I guess the going down to being a good English teacher, being a good teacher in general is like, do you wanna do this? Are you going to be in the situation? Uh, who are you working for? As a teacher, you're very much helping the students. Of course, as a teacher, as an adult, you've got your money problems, you got your apartment problems, you got your dating and relationship problems that you're dealing with. You got the workplace problems, probably with the principal or the senior teacher or whatever, parents, of course. So there's all that stuff. But each and every day, if you like what you're doing, and teaching English in China, South Korea, Ghana, Sydney, Australia, Montreal, Canada. I mean, you can teach Saudi Arabia or Dubai, lots of places you go teach. Does it beat what you're doing now or before? Like, if you're working a corporate job that there's no, if you're working a corporate job where they don't even say thank you, I mean, teaching a group of kids just for a little while it can be hilarious, a breath of fresh air because you're like, this is so much fun. They respond to you. There's feedback when you do this. When you act like a monkey in front of the class laughs. Whereas if you act like a monkey in the office, people are like, "He's acting like a monkey again." Like, "How did you get this job?" Sort of thing. You wanna it's one of those things where you have to sort of with your own job and career, whatever, understand that the even teaching English will have its own issues of just being a regular job, and that I know that there are teachers who, I've met teachers who don't like teaching. Actually, I know a lot of teachers who don't like teaching. They do it because it's a job. It's pays the bills, it gets them away, gets them out doing stuff. It beats doing the alternative, whatever the alternative is. So whether it's working in an office, staying in their hometown, staying in their home country, or, there's sort of a flash of inspiration back in the day when they were younger people, men and women, that they're like, "Yeah, I wouldn't mind going somewhere else, traveling, seeing the world a little bit more, but how can you do it if you have no money?" Well, teaching English is one of those opportunities. Teaching English is one of those jobs that, uh, allows you to not just go overseas and be overseas and to stay overseas, but it gives you that stability of being in the same place, even though you can jump around quite a bit. It's not like a cruise ship. It's not like a management position. It's not like a business person either, like a working traveler who is or even like a freelancer. Those are all very different variations of the working of the expat life. A teacher allows you to be a little bit more in the community almost automatically. A business person, you have to develop those relationships over time. Management, you work in a corporate office and there could be all sorts of issues. Freelancer, freelancer could be fun, I guess, if you're looking for that sort of flexibility, but your money might be variable. People working with you might be very variable as well, and you're probably going to be working alone. Tell you the truth. Whereas teaching, if you're going overseas to teach, chances are you're going to be dealing with people face to face. You're going to be in the pit, as I would call it. You're going to be in the community. You're going You'll be talking to people. You'll be a real face, and it will feel like you are very popular, or at least it'll appear that you are very popular. But the sad fact is that you are an employee, and you are very much an external foreigner to that community, that culture. You just got into it, and there's also sort of a bit of a honeymoon phase that you go through. Of course, I think this applies to just about not just every job, but every place where you have about 6 or 7 months where just everything's great, everything's good and awesome. Then after that, it becomes work, and even after that, if you're okay with that, you get through the first year, and then you keep on going. After 2 or 3 years, I mean, what once you've lost or once you've gotten over the hump of, "Oh my god, what am I gonna do for class today?" And now you're reusing all of your PowerPoints in classes, that's when it can get a little bit tiring, a little bit monotonous, just like a corporate job as well. So that can happen as well when you're teaching English. All right. Well, we've been going on for an hour, and I see my microphone's about to die because it's a DJI microphone that is plugged into a transmitter over there, and I see it's a little red bar. So I'm going to Fengbi Guanla Jiga Shiping, this live Zhibo. Fengbi is sealed off. A Fengbi are Shochu. Fengbi is closed, shuttered, completely gone. But Guanla is to shut the door. You can Guanmen, shut the door. Like that's the character. That's Guan, shut the door. Guanmen, Guanmar. That's what they would say in Chinese. So I'm going to Guan or end. Jeshula Shipin. Jeshula means to end. All right. Thank you very much, Danny, for asking those questions. I hope I answered or at least gave you a good indication of it. I know it was a little bit of a free form. And again, folks, if you want to take a look at some of the other offerings that I have for the site, again, the YouTube channels, sort of repository of my blah blah blahs. I also have a newsletter you can sign up for as well. I've put that in the live chat for this podcast. You can take a look at both on Libsyn and on Spotify as well. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you, or you can send an email as well. StevensLanguageChannel@gmail.com. Hit me up there, or uh, better yet, just to leave a comment on this video or send me a message through one of those methods, and I'll try to get usually I'm pretty good with answering these questions. It's how long it will take me. If you Beijing is what it's like 1:50 now, so we're 12 hours ahead of New York at the moment, or 12 hours ahead of Toronto, which would be considered to be 8 hours ahead of London, I think, or 6 hours. Can't remember. Get in touch. Let me know if I can help anyway. Love to help out. If I can help out, if I can't, then I can try to help you out in finding where to find the answers that you're looking for. Thanks again, folks. Hope that worked. And next time we will see you again. Paka paka. Bye bye. Thank you. In the stream. 再见。